Today we have a little project to do. We're going to take this Manix 2, it's an M390, and we're going to swap out the scales and put on a new set. These are from Rock Scale Design. Let me see, here's the box, the Rock Scale. I've used them before. They make an excellent product. Another thing about these is they're also going to do a liner delete. So we have the stainless steel liner in here, and that's going to go away. We're not going to need that anymore. So this should lighten up the knife a little bit over these G10 scales with the stainless liners and make the knife look better and increase the grip. Because this pattern does give a really nice grip. We're also going to put in a new pocket clip, and we're going to change the spring. Now I've already had this knife apart, and I put in a titanium cage, and then I put in a light spring. This spring is actually a little bit too light. It's not dangerous. I've carried the knife quite a bit, but this is a little lighter than I would like. So you can get aftermarket springs for these. The lights are too, like I said, are too light. The mediums are just about right. But I still prefer a stock spring like this. And what you do is you cut off 2 coils. And after cutting off those 2 coils, it gives you the right tension, and the blade is still snappier than it is with the aftermarket springs. For example, here's a Manix 2 lightweight. If you listen, it still sounds like a stock knife. But yet, it's easier to pull back on the ball cage lock. It makes the knife a pleasure to use and gives you that nice thwack. Let me bring it up by the microphone. You still get that nice, satisfying thwack on the open, and it's tighter in here. So in effect, the clipped stock spring gives you the equivalent of a stronger detent, so you get a more satisfying opening. Even though these knives don't have a conventional detent, it's the spring pressure. It's better with the stock spring. So I prefer a stock spring cut off. Okay, let's start the disassembly. We're going to use T8 and T10 on this. Okay, let's get the other one. So I'm going to remove the pocket clip. What I'll do is I'll keep those 3 screws together. I'll put the pocket clip there, and then the new pocket clip. Okay. Let's break some of these body screws free. All right. Let me break the pivot free. I just like to break things free before I loosen up anything too far or disassemble everything. Again, it's nice to have a mat like this that has different ridges and stuff like this. It essentially makes different trays where you can put screws and group things together. In fact, let's move the spring over. All right, we'll take the pivot out. Okay, this knife should be ready to come apart. There's the ball. Let's pivot this out. And then we have to kind of wiggle we have to get the stock barrel out. There it is. Actually, we can probably just leave that because we're not going to use any of this stuff. So let me just take the washer. Let me put this stuff aside. Now, looking at these scales, you have a D slot here, and this one is perfectly round. So we're going to have to pay attention to that as we put this together, because this pivot has a D shape to it on that side, not on this side. So we're going to have to watch that. Let me take this pivot out. Okay, so I think I'm going to start by putting the pivot right here on the side that has the D slot. Okay, here's going to be the 2 pivot screws. Now those are a little smaller. Okay, that's a T8. So what's going to happen when we put this knife back together, all the hardware is going to be T8. And this one with the D shape, we can torque this down. When we adjust the pivot, we'll adjust it on this side. This side will stay permanently torqued down and hold the pivot from spinning. Okay, now we're going to need this piece, but I'm going to just put 1 screw in here and leave it loose, because we'll need to be able to wiggle this around in order to put the ball cage back together. Okay, so those are going to be the new clip screws. Then we have 4 identical screws left. So that's going to be for here. It's interesting. All right. Didn't feel like it wants to go in all the way. There it goes. All right, like I said, I'm going to leave this a little bit loose so we can wiggle this around. All right. I'm going to clean off, just wipe off the washer. This is my knife lube that I sell in my Etsy store. So we're going to put a few drops on this washer here. Put it over the pivot. Okay, one thing I'm noticing on this, I forgot that the washer doesn't actually go over the pivot. It only goes over this shouldered part. So I have to take this pivot back out. So if you're putting one of these together, remember that. So let's put the screw partway back in, just partway. And then I'm going to push down on the table, and that pops the pivot out. Now we put the washer on. Find the D-shaped side. And we get that in place. Now we can put the screw in the pivot. Okay, a couple drops of oil. I'm going to make sure it gets on the actual pivot itself. I'm not applying more, I'm just using the needle applicator to spread it around. So let's put the blade in, and we'll leave the blade setting about straight out for now. We'll put our washer on. Now on this ball cage, the side with the hole in it, where the ball goes in, faces towards the top. So you want to keep that in mind. So we'll slide the spring on here and try and get everything in place. It's easy for parts like this ball wants to fall out. I'll try and keep my finger on there, but it's not that easy to do, especially with the camera. Okay. Now let's get a screw in the other side. Alright, we're not quite lined up. Put it so I can see the hole through there. Let's try it again. Sometimes the alignment on these things can be a little bit picky. And that's why I'll screw it again. Nope, that's still not going. Loosen this back one up a hair more. Sorry if I'm getting out of frame. It's kind of hard to do this behind the camera. Like I said, the alignment here can be very picky trying to get these things back together, because you're holding multiple parts. It's not easy to do. We'll stick the barrel in and stick this scale on. All right, let's put it together. We'll see what we have. We'll get these 4 screws tight. For some reason, these new screws, you need to work them in and out a little bit before they get tight. Okay, I think it's just a little too much, so we're going to make an adjustment. We're going to pull this back apart. We're going to try just cutting 1 coil spring off. And that's probably how you should proceed. Since I've replaced a lot of these springs, I have a half a dozen or so extra ones. But when you're doing this, you probably want to start really slow. All right, let's take some out of this other side here. Take this top one out and loosen the bottom. That way we can get this thing apart. And try and get this spring out of here. You know what? let's just take it all the way apart to make it easier. Got to watch how you hold this knife so you don't get cut because the thing is sharp. All right, let's just cut one coil off. So we're just going to do a little bit here. All right, now let's try that. Let's get the one screw in loose. Open the blade up so that can slide forward. Pop the spring in. Get that ball back in place. Get a second screw in here. There goes the ball. Things are so fiddly. There it goes. I think that's going to be a lot better. All right, now let's put it back together. Put the barrel in place. Scale on. Loosely do these screws. Now that everything's in, we can get them good and snug. Pivot's a little tight right there. She drops there, not bad. Centering is good. Let's go with the new clip. The new clip is a deeper carry. What's nice is even these screws are T8. Okay, we got to leave the screw pretty loose because the hole isn't quite big enough. The head of the screw hits on the edge of the hole, so we need to leave it close so that the clip can drop away a little bit and allow the screw to get into place. See, you got to allow that head of the screw to get underneath the hole. And once they're all in, we can snug everything up. As a quick follow-up, if you can see here, these are the titanium critter scales for the Spyderco Manix 2. I really like this pattern. I think it looks good. It's got a nice texture. You get a good grip on it. Now, one thing I did is I put the stock pocket clip back on. I didn't really like how this clip felt in hand. So the stock clip lets me get a better grip on my fingers to make the lock easier to work. I also didn't like how this replacement clip, see, it's stuck past the end of the knife. It actually set about like this. I don't know, and I just didn't like that. This rides deep enough in the pocket. You know, it's not much that's exposed, and it's just enough to help you get a grip on the knife to draw it. So I actually like this kind of clip, and I find Spyderco stock clips to be pretty good. And when the knife is open, the way it sits in the hand, this part sits where you have the little divot, that little hole in your hand, and you don't even feel the clip. So I'm going to stick with the stock clip. Now it remains to be seen. I don't know if I want to stay with these bronze screws, or I may put the factory silver screws back in. There's enough contrast on the body over here with the bronze. I kind of think the bronze against the silver here looks a little bit funny. So let me know in the comments down below. Would you stay with the bronze screws in the clip or put the factory silver ones back in? Now another question. Why M390? I know all the rage today is MagnaCut, and Spyderco does have a Manix 2 lightweight out in MagnaCut. From what I've seen, I think they run that one at a little bit lower hardness, like probably around 59. I did see one guy who did a test on it, and that's what he came up with, was around 59, 59 and a half, which makes sense because it's part of the Salt series. And when you run MagnaCut at a higher hardness, you lose some of the stain resistance. So at around 59, between 59 and 60, you're going to maximize the rust resistance of the knife. And like I said, being a Salt series, that makes perfect sense. Now, if you look on Knife Steel Nerds, and you look on Laren's charts, MagnaCut has an edge retention of 5. Now those charts do show a lower hardness. They don't show the higher hardness that you should be running MagnaCut at. So that's probably about true of what the Spyderco Manix 2 is in this, as part of the Salt series. But this M390 is listed on the charts as 6.5. Now, in my experience, Spyderco runs their M390 harder. So instead of 6.5, it's probably about a 7 on edge retention. I have other knives in MagnaCut. I have knives in S9DV. S9DV does beat out this M390. But other knives I have, like I have a couple from the Tactile Knife Company, which are certified at 63 to 64 Rockwell. I have a Chris Reeve Zahn, and I've had an Incosi with an Insinco blade. That also was 63 to 64. This holds an edge at least as good as those, if not a little bit better. This M390 is phenomenal. It has practically the same rust resistance. This is rated as a 9. MagnaCut's rated at 9.5. So with this M390, you'll get a little bit better edge retention than you will with the MagnaCut. You'll get, for all intents and purposes, the same rust resistance, but you will sacrifice some toughness to gain that little edge and edge retention. Now in a folding knife like this, that's no problem. I've had plenty of knives in M390 and I've never had any issues with a single one of them. So M390 is more than tough enough for a folder. Now if we were talking a fixed blade, I would want the MagnaCut for the extra measure of toughness. That would be a no-brainer. I definitely would want MagnaCut. But in the folder, you know, you don't have to always go to the latest and greatest. I already had this knife in M390, and when you compare the properties side by side, and then in experience from using the knives, there's really no advantage in having this knife in MagnaCut over what I have right here in M390. And I already own this, so it doesn't cost me anything extra. So that's my reason for upgrading this knife and putting these titanium scales on, because I'm more than happy with this blade. It's an excellent knife. Out of curiosity, let's get a weight on the Manix 2 with the titanium scales versus a stock Manix 2. Now, I should have weighed this knife before I did the upgrade, but I didn't. Okay, this is a crew Carta, so this is crew wear with micarta scales, and it weighs 4.6 ounces. The new upgraded knife with titanium scales weighs 3.9 ounces. So that's a pretty good weight for a Manix 2. And in hand, it feels no heavier or maybe a little bit lighter than what this was stock, just going by memory. So it's a good upgrade, doesn't increase the weight. So even though I'm going to say the G10 would have weighed less than the titanium, you have to consider you're also eliminating the liners. You have 2 stainless steel liners that are being eliminated. So that adds up. So this is a good upgrade. And if nothing else, I can say it did not add extra weight to the knife. Very nice. I'm glad that I did this.